Hey everybody, welcome to Therapist Take, and we're going to talk about relational cancer, so don't go anywhere. If you hear me whispering, it's because we have a new soundboard person.
We do.
Yeah. And she wouldn't let me put her on mic or camera.
Right.
I think it'd be fun to talk to her.
Right, to put her on the spot. But we're not going to do that.
No.
Right.
We kind of are, but nobody can see.
That's true. That's true.
The invisible person. But anyways, we appreciate everybody that has tuned in or is tuning in on a rebroadcast. And we're going to talk about relational cancer today and what exactly does that mean. But before we do, I just want to remind everybody to do all the housekeeping things that you normally would do or you hear on every YouTube video that's ever been done, which is, subscribe to our channel, ring the bell. If you're on Facebook, head on over to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. But this is also a podcast. And so if you're listening to this on the podcast, it's not live. But we do these live. So you're welcome to head on over to YouTube and subscribe to us so that you can watch us record these live. But we do appreciate you listening on the podcast. So make sure that you follow us on whatever podcast platform you're on. Excuse me. And give us a 5-star review.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's good to see you again.
Yes, you too.
Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about relational cancer, and I felt like we were just about to get in a fight.
But we didn't.
No, I think because Reagan's here.
Probably. We don't want
Yeah.
to, totally stress her out.
For anybody who doesn't know, which would be most people, Reagan is one of our owner's daughters. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of like to get some scoop on this person, this owner. While she's not here, but she refuses to do so.
Right, she's honoring it. She's dutiful, right? Yeah.
Yeah, she's honoring her mom. She's not going to give us. I mean, we want the lowdown.
We do.
Yeah.
I know. It's kind of nice though. It feels full circle, right?
Right.
To have help from someone who was a tiny person when we
started
this journey. I know.
It's hard to see. We need a camera on her right now so people can see this grown woman that we're talking about.
I know. They'll have to trust us.
But we are grateful for Reagan. Those of you people watching, we have a switcherboard operator, so and it's usually Hannah, and she's always behind the scenes doing things, and she can't be here today, so we have a substitute today.
That's right.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about this idea of relational cancer, and the reason it came up for me when I selected this topic was because I often find myself in session with clients talking about certain things, in one in particular, which we'll get into, that I will always say it's a cancer to relationships. Do you ever say things like that, or do you ever use that terminology, cancer or sickness?
I feel like I have, but I don't. It's not. If I do, it hasn't been in a long time, and it's definitely not regular cancer. That word, because that word is just. I don't know anybody that hears that word and doesn't have a reaction to it.
I tend to gravitate toward like medical terminology with my metaphors for some reason, like the marriage is on life support.
Yeah, you do that.
I do.
Right, yeah. And driving.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true. It absolutely is.
So all you do is worry about medical issues and drive, Josh.
Apparently, it's on my mind a lot.
Told you about your psyche, right?
Yeah. Be a good driver,
right?
And take care of yourself,
right?
Right. The two most important things in life, right there.
I think so.
If we figure that out, then we'll all be okay.
We would. Yeah.
We'll all be okay, and we'll all get home safe.
We all get home safe. Such a dad.
That's right. So I'm just going to start with the kind of the motivational metaphor here of relational cancer, or the thing that I always say, and then we can kind of go from there. And so, and I think you'll agree with me, but it's complacency. I mean, that seems to come up the most, and I don't think it's the only cancer to relationships, but it comes up a lot because I do think a lot of couples fall prey to it. and so you agree with me on
that it happens frequently?
Happens frequently into it's a cancer.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Slow, maybe.
Right.
Right.
Which I think fits better with the cancer metaphor, because most cancers aren't fast. Even the ones that we think are fast, or they might have someone might be in stage 2 and then a month later they're in stage 4. Mm-hmm. From my understanding, another great book is the book Outlive.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Peter Attia.
Peter Attia. I think he talks about this a lot, is that, whether it's heart disease or cancer, most of it starts years before it shows up. So slow growing, I think, is definitely fitting. I think the other thing that fits with it, and this is also to anybody that understands medical stuff better than me, is welcome to weigh in and correct me.
And poke the holes, but...
Right. But how I have understood how cancer typically works is, how does this thing enter your body and then, able to make itself a home and grow and kind of take over. And the way I've heard it described was that, it basically, I don't know if it's all cancers or just some cancers would, disguise itself as something that's supposed to be there, so that your body won't fight against it. And then it allows, and then of course it grows and takes over. And complacency is definitely something to me that like when you're entering into the beginning stages of complacency, it kind of looks like it's supposed to be there, because complacency is settling, right? It's settling down. It's like, we've arrived. We can breathe.
Finally.
Right? And we don't have to do anything anymore. Right? Like, we finally get to relax. And then, that kind of gets a foothold.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you used a word earlier that I think also describes how complacency starts from a place that's not dangerous, which is routine. Right? Like, you create rhythms and routine, and the brain likes routine because it doesn't have to really think, right? It's got such a familiar roadmap that it knows what you do when you wake up and when you go to work, and, it's kind of like driving, to go back to your other favorite metaphors, right? You don't really have to think about how you get places that you always go. You just go, right? I don't think to turn left or right. So I think that complacency can definitely come from a place that actually is pretty good. I mean, we need routine, right? We need familiarity.
Right. I think that's the key, is that, of course, we need it. And especially as our lives get busier and more chaotic, right? Sure. I mean, so, when a couple, we kind of, as we walk through the kind of the beginning stages of a couple relationship, is that you meet, you're crazy about each other, everything's about you, and maybe it's like me and my wife, we meet in college, and we had 5 bills to pay when we first got married. I remember, like, we had a little handwritten book where we wrote down, like, our 5 bills. I put a check mark after I wrote the check for each one. And of course, we had no money. We had enough money, let me just say that, to pay those bills. And that's about it. It's like, well, what time's class? Because we were in college still, and I think some of our, one of our, my wife was concerned about me skipping class to watch Judge Judy.
Lots of reasons to be concerned
we still talk about this. That's like, how many times I skipped class because I wanted to catch the end of Judge Judy.
Oh, Josh.
I mean, YouTube wasn't like it was. I mean,
I know.
I can't.
What's a guy to do?
And I can't be asking people, hey, did you see the end of Judge Judy? Like, but as life builds, right, then it's like, okay, so then we enter into our careers, and then we have kids, and they got their things, and so routine becomes really important, so that we can have sanity.
Sure.
But then I think sometimes we get really focused on creating those routines and making sure that the well-oiled machine stays well-oiled.
Yeah.
That we forget that we're actually supposed to be having some novelty and some adventure and, just
change.
Challenge.
Yeah.
You know, not just walking around oiling all the gears in the machine all the time, you know.
Yeah. So I think you're kind of describing how complacency can start as something that slips in to the system undetected as dangerous and can grow into something
Absolutely,
that becomes dangerous, right? Because when things are so routine, you don't notice. That's like especially in couples, right? You'll hear a lot. I don't even know if they pay attention to me. I don't even know if they notice, right?
Yeah.
They're just used to this or used to me. And that's off that when people are saying that to us in therapy, they're not saying that in a way that they're like, oh, good. Whew. I'm so glad that my partner, all they do is notice I exist. Right? They're saying, I feel really sad that I'm just part of the routine.
Right. And why don't they say anything? Because that stirs the pot.
Sure.
That
creates the change.
It creates chaos. And it's like, well, I don't want to. It's so weird, right? It's like this thing of complacency. If it's like a cancer, it's like saying, well, I don't want to get treatment because then, you know, it might upset the cancer, you know, or, you know, like, or I don't know who would want somebody to have cancer, but it's almost like, you know, like,
well, I don't want to know.
I'm going to inconvenience the doctor.
Sure. Well, I even think a lot of people say things like, well, I don't really want to know. I'm not going to ask that question. I don't really want to know. Whether that's about a medical diagnosis and treatment, whether that's about how their partner really feels, if they decide to, you know, voice some of the way that they're feeling, ignored, or that things are too routine, right? I mean, sometimes it's hard to know. Ignorance feels like bliss. Perhaps. Right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely can understand. The older I get, the more I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Right.
The ignorance is bliss thing. That's a very, whoever came up with that, I want to.
Right. High five.
High five. I'm like, they nailed it.
Yep.
But, so complacency is definitely one of those things that we really have to work at controlling for and not mistaking it as something good for us to have because there is some things involved in it like routine and keeping order that is good for us, but complacency is when that kind of takes a life of its own is what I kind of feel like it is. And so I mean we're going to get into some the thing that I know you're itching to talk about, which is the four horsemen stuff here in a minute. But you know, that one comes up the most for me in therapy. Is there another one you think that you find yourself?
I think you and I will agree. Resentment.
Yeah.
That one comes up a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
And I even think sometimes it's fair to say that clients aren't always aware, perhaps, like completely in tune with resentment. Right.
Yeah.
You know, so if I reflect back, sometimes like, boy, it seems like you're kind of holding on to that, or that seems like that's still churning for you. Right. Is that, is that on the verge of becoming, or could that be in that bucket of resentment? Right.
Yeah. I would say that feeling of resentment might actually be more common than complacency in some ways.
Well, that may be fair. Yeah, sure.
Because it's just so easy to do.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's
very
so easy
automatic.
to resent people for stuff, you know, for things that have happened to you. And now, one of the things, so I do talk. This is something that comes up a lot in sessions with me too, with clients, and I really have spent some time thinking about resentment because it's a very complicated phenomenon.
It is.
But like with all emotions, to me, they all have a functional purpose. And there's actually something you may not know is like, it's actually a conversation you and I were having once where it really kind of triggered me into thinking about this. And it was one time we were probably consulting about a case or something, and you were saying like, you know, well, what is anger there for? Anger is there to let you know someone has trespassed. I'll never forget you saying that. And I was like, yeah, that's right, you know. And then it got me really thinking, well, what are the other emotions there for? What, like, I'm not saying it's only there for that, but the primary. And I was thinking, so why would our brains think resentment, this whatever, that's the name we gave it, right? But this feeling that we have that we call resentment,
right?
Why would it think that's important for us to have? Because it's definitely not a fun one.
No, it's not.
And it is also one I think people feel like they the responsibility to remove it is on somebody else, which I don't think is true, but I think that's how it feels.
Yeah.
Like, Josh, I resent this person for that. Would you help them change so I don't have to resent them anymore?
Yeah.
I don't want to resent them. And I think the responsibility of resentment to remove it is on us. So, because I think resentment, to me, and you can let me know what you think about this.
Okay.
To me, resentment is there to let you know, similar to how you said anger is there to let you know someone's trespass. Resentment is there to let you know that you are holding on to something that you need to speak up about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you say it that way. I would only add maybe that resentment's also there maybe as an opportunity to explore, do you need some boundaries? And is speaking up the boundary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is, creating some distance or changing the rules of that relationship? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's changing the rules or establishing boundaries without the other person's consent or participation, right? It's, boy, when I engage in this or, when I keep making these attempts and I get this negative response, I feel resentful. So I think I'm going to make some changes, right? And speaking up is often the best choice there. But sometimes the boundary is I'm actually going to have some distance or, not do something instead, right? Because I don't want to I don't want to give myself the opportunity to get lured in to holding resentment.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And an example I use to kind of illustrate this is like the concept of walking on eggshells, which most people understand that metaphor, probably have even used it from time to time. But like if you say that, every time I'm around this person, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, and you're saying it in such a way, it's like, so therefore they need to stop doing this thing that they do that makes me feel like I need to walk on eggshells. And I get it, and I feel like I have been there.
Yes.
At times. And but really, it's the burden of not walking on eggshells is really on me. And so like if I don't want to walk on eggshells, I'm just not going to walk on eggshells. And I have to decide what that means. And the longer I walk on eggshells, the more I find myself resenting this person for putting the eggshells down.
Right.
When I realized I don't have to walk on them.
Right.
And then the other thing I really go with people and say, if you want to go up a level, another meta level here is that there are no eggshells.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah. Right. But yeah. So how does this, though, do you think become cancerous? How does it become something that may start as, a functional response and then become something dangerous? So,
and I think this is going to segue nicely into the four horsemen, because especially when mentioning resentment,
right?
I think resentment is the feeling that happens before contempt, which John Gottman, who coined the concept of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and we'll name those in just a second, which we already know one's contempt, but that's kind of the scariest one, right? And so like, if you don't take care of the resentment, and once it turns into contempt, it's like, let me say it this way. I know we're using the cancer metaphor, but let me change it to a different medical one. HIV and AIDS. Oh. Right? Like we often think of now, like HIV is very treatable and it's scary as hell, right? But it's treatable. Now, we can, if you catch the condition right at that point, there's hope, right? But from my understanding, once it's AIDS,
it's much harder.
Yeah.
Right. I was thinking of contempt when we talked about it kind of being like the end stage of cancer.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Which maybe not always has to be, meaning that it's over.
I
but
agree.
Where it's going to be really challenging.
Which I think Gottman reflects on that. I don't think he would
say
he
does.
In the research that every couple that experience contempt
the relationship ends, right?
But I think it's a large number.
It's dope, and it's like cancer, right? The more cancer cells you have, the worse, right? So the more contempt, the worse, right? No, I do think resentment kind of does lead in, like you're saying, because it grows into the four horsemen. I guess we should name them and explain a little bit.
Let's go ahead and do that.
So John Gottman, if you don't recognize that name. He's kind of the marriage guru expert. He's that beautiful blend of someone who is a really amazing researcher who can take his research and communicate in ways that I think everybody can understand. And I think he's a beautiful speaker and presenter. So there's a lot of people who are good at one of those. He's really unique in being good at all three.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of research. That's what I appreciate the most about what he talks to, public about, is this information is based in research. And what he noticed about couples who were having marital strengths and marital struggles was that he would see the presence of these 4 horsemen, as he called them, these 4 patterns and responses. And the more that he saw them, probably the less happy, satisfied, and the more at risk the marriage was to ending, right? Or relationship. It doesn't, I don't think everybody was married in the study, but long-term committed relationships.
Yeah.
And so they are defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, and contempt.
Right. Or as we say,
Yeah, right. That's
CCDS.
Right. And how are those things cancerous? Or, I mean, how can we extend the metaphor with these concepts?
So this is the debate you and I were having before
we started, as we always do. A little.
Right. Which I'm like, maybe we should save the debate for the live show. Let you decide.
Yeah.
Type thing.
Sure.
But to me, these are the things that would be symptomatic of a cancer. So. I start, and I think he kind of reflects on this in the book too. Like these are a progression,
right?
So I think defensiveness is at the beginning.
Criticism, defensiveness.
Is it criticism?
Yeah.
Criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and then contempt.
Yeah.
Right? And so like when you catch yourself being critical, or overly critical, or your partner's being overly critical. It's really, in being critical and defensiveness, and to me, are often
kind of a stimulus response.
Yeah, they're happening kind of simultaneously at times.
Because as you criticize, I much defend.
Sure.
Right.
And it's kind of like these things. It's really not linear. It's really like the more critical you become, the more contemptuous you may feel.
Sure.
Which means the more. It feeds right back into how the criticism changes.
And the more you're criticized, the more you must defend and protect. Sure.
Or stonewalling,
Right, and that's the I think, again, the building of defensiveness is stonewalling.
So I like to kind of look at the 4 horsemen, or at least I don't often go over the 4 horsemen in session with people, but I definitely am remembering them for myself as I'm watching for that with couples, as I'm working with them, to see, like, are these symptoms present and how severe are they? Right. To kind of gauge, like, where they are, what we need to do in treatment. Yeah. And that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And so,
sure.
But to me, it's like, what are these 4 horsemen, as a whole?
Yes.
Is this coming from complacency?
Right.
Is it coming from resentment?
Sure.
Or a lot of resentments? Another one we didn't mention that I want to make sure we mention is, I think, is a cancer, is like enmeshment.
Okay.
Particularly like which Ken Adams does a lot of work on this, like mother-enmeshment, or even parent enmeshment.
Sure.
But even like enmeshment with each other, which we would refer to probably as codependency, codependent relationship.
Yeah, it's kind of an off-limits word a little bit, but yeah.
But in some ways, a codependent relationship doesn't feel so much like a cancer to me than like codependency with your parents. Enmeshment with your parents.
Yeah, no, I feel I think they're different. Yeah, they may have similar, like, I don't know, measurements in a sense, but yeah, I think that there's a different outcome and different risk, perhaps. Right.
Which I think that's the reason why mother-in-laws get a bad rap.
I know.
Right.
Sure.
And it's always. And I apologize as a guy. I'm just gonna make a universal apology. I don't know why it always is like a woman. The mother-in-laws get a bad rap, and it's always like a female thing, or something.
It is. But I think that does reflect this cultural mother-son enmeshment that you're kind of referring to, right? Which that's a good using cancer as an idea, that one, when a child is born and it needs its mother 24/7, you are enmeshed, right? But it's it's necessary for life. It's developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
Right. But I really like the oversimplification of parenting, right? That parenting is a V, right? And so you start at the beginning and you're really, really close. And over time, there's supposed to be more and more distance, right? As the baby becomes a child, becomes an adolescent, becomes a young adult, right? And they find their own way. And I think enmeshment, doesn't have that space. And over time, what started out as okay now actually becomes inhibiting, right? Inhibiting for both, because they can't find other relationships and experiences that are fulfilling, because they're so limited by that too close of a relationship between that parent and child, even adult child.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And you asked me a question that I was wanting to kind of feed back to you, and so we kind of sidetracked there with the enmeshment thing a minute. But what about how you view the four horsemen? Is it more symptomatic for you, or is the four horsemen kind of like a cancer in and of themselves?
I do think it's a progression. So I don't know. Maybe the beginning of that would say indicators, perhaps symptoms, and then it being a problem. I think, you could also just even say the intensity of those things. Like if the interactional pattern of the couple is you criticize, I defend, someone stonewalls, someone continues to pursue with criticism until they both just can't stand each other. That's a pretty, that's going, we know which way that relationship is going. No one's going to be satisfied with that, right? So I think maybe it's how much and how often do I see it as symptoms, or do I see it as a cancer? I think stonewalling in general is probably going to lead to not good things.
Yeah.
Right? I do think that it works against you. I understand that having a break, needing some time to collect yourself, I find that really adaptive, right?
Right.
I think sometimes people are great at staying in the intense moment and working through it. But as a person who likes to take her time, right, as a distancer in that pursuit distancer pattern, taking some time is helpful, but taking some time so much so that it never is addressed and you just keep kicking the can down the road, or avoiding or minimizing, or whatever strategies you have to do, it does build that stone wall around you, and then you're just all alone.
Yeah. And I even had a childhood friend that died of cancer, literally died of cancer. And this was just a report coming from one person that knew him, and I hadn't seen him in years and years and years. But at the funeral, I was like, I didn't even know what happened, I didn't even know he was sick, because it's been years since I'd seen him. And according to this person, he knew there was something there. He just no one could talk to him about it or anything. And it was, I don't know if he was stonewalling or avoiding. Who knows? He could have been getting great medical care and just didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
But I do think that, even with physical ailments, we can stonewall, and then it becomes something else,
Sure.
Or becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah. For sure.
Than what it would necessarily have to be.
Right. Sure.
And so in stonewalling, when people stonewall, I think what people don't understand is that that's what feels right.
Yeah.
In that moment, it feels like it's usually about de-escalation, trying to prevent something from worse happening. So
I don't want to say something I don't really mean. I don't want to do this. Right. Yeah.
And let me ask you this, how many times have you felt something weird on your body, or and you're like, oh, that's weird, and then it just goes away. So it's like, it's not like it's not supported.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of times that our bodies just fix itself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would say, that's, especially when you're young, right? Most ailments just,
Yeah.
You have sore knees today, you'll probably feel better tomorrow.
I think there are some relational things.
I agree.
So I think that it's easy to convince ourselves, like, when it's not going away, then maybe this
just
time.
Just further away.
Just one more.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm just not ignoring it hard enough.
Right. I've got to really double down on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Yeah. So I think I'd be interested to hear from other people on like what they might consider a relational cancer, but complacency definitely hit at the top of the list, and then I didn't even think about resentment until you brought it up. But that, like I said, I think that might actually come up more because I think a lot of people can. I think a lot of people will feel resentment even when there's not complacency in the relationship. Sure. And enmeshment's definitely there, but I'm sure there are others. Sure. That those are just the ones that we come up off the top of our head. And I knew as soon as I texted you about it, I was like, John Gottman was there rolling through my head. Yeah. So I knew you would bring that up too.
Oh yeah, you didn't even have to wait. You didn't have to say it because you knew I would.
Right.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about the last one and then contempt?
Oh yeah.
I mean, we've talked a little bit, but let's kind of go there.
Yeah, let's.
It's the one that, as a therapist, I don't know about you, but when I'm in the presence of it, I feel it in my body, and it's this sinking feeling in my gut of, oh boy, that's not just rough, but it feels different.
Just you saying that and how you're talking about it, I'm like, I don't know if people heard me smack into the mic, but that was kind of like, that's that hopelessness smack, like, oh, man, like, yeah. But I do like it. You're right. Like it is, as therapists, we're, I don't know how, if there's a therapist out there that just kind of feels hopeless all the time, I don't know how you would do that. Like, I mean, we kind of in some ways have to be glass half full.
Absolutely.
People,
I think so.
More often than not. And when I experience contempt in a relationship, it is like a sinking feeling of like, crap, like I want to be hopeful still, but there's that. And it's not because of what Gottman says or anything. I think anybody.
I think it's intuitive. I think it's just being a person.
Like, this isn't good. This isn't good.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's all hope is gone. No. But there's usually a lot of work to be done, even whether the relationship works out or not.
Once you've gone to contempt space, feeling that, experiencing that, you have to do some recovery, whether the relationship stays or not. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been like in thinking about I don't know if I've ever felt contempt for anybody. Maybe, but I've been mad at my wife, I mean, I've been really mad, and we've had ups and downs like everybody else does. And we've had lows that were surprisingly low, I'm like, it is really hard for me to imagine looking at her and feeling contempt. Like it's almost like she would have to just be somebody else in my mind.
Well, I think that's what trauma does, though. Then those people become unrecognizable, and then maybe that's where that thing you never thought you would feel of contempt is all of a sudden, presented. It presents itself. Yeah.
And let me disclaimer here too. I'm not suggesting that if you feel contempt that something's wrong with you. No. I'm really trying to express sympathy for like that. That's just sad. Like, I'm sorry that what has happened has happened. That, I don't think, I'm sure there are people that are just contemptuous people. Right. But usually they have been hurt too. But to go from, somebody that, to be with somebody that you once loved, to feel contempt. I mean, that must have been some hard stuff.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Yeah. So, I don't know. I just keep thinking in my head when you hear contempt, I also think hate.
Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah, I think it's pretty synonymous.
Yeah.
I would say like if you were gonna put it on a continuum, maybe hate would be the last, the bookend of it. But in contempt is, the extreme Close. Of that, but once it reaches the bookend, I guess it's hate. So, well, maybe we should end on something.
I know. It feels sad to end it on the saddest part.
You decided to do that.
I did. You're right. I walked us through the progression.
You're like, can we do contempt?
First, I know. I did say that. I did ask for that. Right. But I think we started where it's,
Sure.
Stage one all the way to the stage
here I am
4.
blaming you. We should do a gaslighting one next, because here I am blaming you when I came up with a relational cancer.
You did pick the topic, and I agreed, right? Yeah. No, but I mean, I think the part of our job here is to get people thinking about things, and sometimes it's going to make you feel things, right? Which is the point.
Right.
Right? Because relationships are knowledge, but they're about how you feel. And so to have these concepts that help you think and feel, I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate anybody that's decided to tune in and have found benefit in these in our discussions, or just the videos that we put out. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Check out the show notes, because I try to put a lot of resources in there. So we'll definitely make sure to put a link to the Gottman book, maybe Peter Attia, and anything else that we can kind of think of after we wrap up the show. We try to throw in there and to make it as useful as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we actually have some guests coming on.
Yes.
I think starting next week.
Yep.
And so I'm looking forward to that. And guess we'll see everybody back then.
Yeah. Thank you.